Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Lauren. I'm the UK team lead and the talent acquisition lead for AssessFirst UK. Super excited to be joined today by Matt Delahaye, who is the co-founder and CEO at inploi. We'll do a bit of a more kind of in-depth introduction in just a second. But just to kind of go through the meaning for today and what we're talking about, we've done a lot of webinars at AssessFirst. We speak to lots of different vendors within the space. And one thing we've kind of like wanting to hone in on in a little bit more detail is the importance of considering how all touch points across the recruitment process actually influence the candidate experience. And things like assessments, things like career websites, things like job advertising aren't necessarily the first things that spring to mind when you think about how they are going to impact candidate experience. You know, we look at more of those direct touch points like your interviews and the feedback that you're giving candidates, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so much value in making sure all of these points from the very, very start of this process, the very first time they hear of an organization, right the way through, I mean, in my eyes, till the candidate actually leaves the organization once they've been hired, they all play such an important role in creating that positive candidate experience. So basically, that's what we're going to explore today. We're going to be looking at a few areas that maybe you and your organization haven't necessarily thought of how they'll directly impact your candidate experience. And we're going to give you some insight into how you can optimize that process as best as possible. So Matt, I'll hand over to you. If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of an intro to you personally and then to inploi and your journey, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Hi, Lauren. Thanks so much for having me along and great to be having this conversation with you. My name is Matthew Delahaye. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at inploi. And we are a technology company based in London, focused on helping large enterprises transform their candidate experience or candidate journey to help them achieve much better hiring outcomes and navigate and innovate in a fast-changing labor market. We started inploi nearly 8 years ago, initially having tried to find a job as a student in hospitality at the time and been appalled by, relevantly, the candidate experience. And together with my co-founder, Alex, we set out to build a tool or a solution, which would become a product to try and address that. Initially, we built something kind of like LinkedIn to try and build a community, a platform that would connect people with job opportunities. And the relentless focus on that was how do you reach people and how do you get them to find a job, create a profile and apply for it, which is not what we do now, but it is relevant because we sort of worked on that for a couple of years, became really, really good at reaching people online, understanding how you optimize the journey of them kind of registering and applying for a job and how you use data to optimize that process. Fast forward, 3 years, the pandemic rolled around and we had a pipeline of hotels and cafes and restaurants and bars and similar businesses that obviously were not hiring. So we went to ground and kind of decided to survive, but weren't sure exactly what that was going to look like. And then coming out the other side, in conversation with a handful of the bigger brands and larger enterprise employers we were speaking with, realized pretty quickly, and I mean, you just had to open a newspaper, that companies up and down the country and in fact across the world could not find the people they needed to run their businesses effectively. Because the labor market was fundamentally different. A lot of people had left. In the UK, Brexit had meant a lot of European workers had gone back. And they didn't know what to do about it. And their technology and their kind of approach to addressing these challenges was at the heart of the problem. The approaches and the tech of an old world where there was an abundance of candidates and enough would get through. Our kind of understanding of the problem was that actually key to solving it is addressing the candidate experience. How do you reach the right sorts of people wherever they are on the internet, especially accessing new pools of people? How do you then get them to complete an application as frictionlessly as possible? And then how do you use data and analytics to understand that? So that's a long way of saying, coming out of the pandemic, we then pivoted our business model towards kind of a SaaS software as a service platform, working with large enterprises, integrating with existing ATSs or applicant tracking systems to transform the entire front end of a company's hiring, from how they advertise jobs and reach job seekers through their careers pages, application processes, and how they get people into the ATS, and then how do they understand holistically and objectively the data behind all of this to optimize those experiences and get better results.
Amazing. And I mean, it's similar to us. We know that any organization that invests in their people by using such things as assessments, for example, and similar with you with inploi, immediately the candidates know that they're working for an organization who truly cares, because a lot of companies don't invest into these areas, right? So it kind of immediately gives you that insight into, okay, cool, these guys really, really care about the journey that the candidates are going to experience. They really want the right candidates to be landing in these right candidate pools. And yeah, it's just so awesome that this is becoming its own sector, and that so many organizations understand the value of doing this correctly and actually employing the experts to manage the process for them as well. Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Of course, we're going to go into all of this in more detail very, very soon. So as mentioned, I am the UK team lead for AssessFirst. I am a talent acquisition lead across my career. What's been really awesome since joining AssessFirst is, obviously, I use the system, I use the AssessFirst platform to make all of our hires, both across the UK and globally. I work for an organization who truly understand the power of hiring the best people for your organization and of managing that employee experience just as much as the candidate experience. So I've been very lucky to transition into this kind of management role for the UK, which means that I get to bring my experiences and challenges that I've faced across talent acquisition across the last 8 years, how AssessFirst has helped me personally solve those, but also kind of guiding our clients and the usability and the usage of our system for those clients from a more personal perspective as well. So yeah, as an organization, we are a behavioral assessment provider. Similar to you, Matt, our organization was founded not long after our CEO graduated his master's degree. And he created the kind of foundations of AssessFirst back in 2002. We've worked in the HR consultancy space, predominantly in France, for the first 10 years. And then around 2012 was when we kind of had that pivot, and we were looking at, right, what's missing in this space? What are organizations needing to be able to identify the long-term potential of candidates? And that was when we started looking at how technology and AI could be brought in to improve this process and actually mitigate a lot of the challenges that we were facing as a recruitment sector. So yeah, fast forward to present day, we're a global organization. We've got 3,500, 4,000 clients around the world who are using us to really bring the forefront of someone's natural talents and ability to the reason that they're hired. We 100% believe that there are far better indicators of success as opposed to just looking at a CV, as opposed to just looking at university and degrees, really looking at someone's core natural talents, their most prevalent personality traits, what motivates them, and how they make decisions as well. And these are the factors that we assess and that we give in results in data to organizations to move their processes forward in the best way. So yeah, a little bit about us. Obviously, today is all about prioritizing this candidate experience. First topic we want to dive into is, what does quality actually look like? You know, how in an organization do you understand what makes a candidate good, and separate that from candidates you don't want? So, Matt, if you could kick us off talking a little bit about this global hiring crisis we're finding ourselves in, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have a very interesting different perspective on this, because we're looking at it in a sort of macro sense and kind of the top of the funnel. You're looking at it from a much more granular sense, and together, that's how you should be doing it. But as I mentioned, the labor market has changed fundamentally. It's easing up a bit, but coming out of the pandemic, record numbers of unfilled vacancies. For the first time since in the last sort of 80 years, more vacancies than available job seekers. So the immediate issue or challenge was, how do you get us just as many people as possible into an application process? Wherever you can find them, we'll take anybody just to do a job. That seems to have changed a bit now, and increasingly we're hearing the message from clients like, we are getting the volume we need, but there is not enough quality within that. One of the people we work with, I think 95% of the applications they received from job board advertising, kind of they were following a traditional way, were not relevant for the roles that they apply for, which results in a horrible candidate experience because these people, just don't get responded to, or they all get rejected, and waste a huge amount of time on the hiring manager or recruiter side because you are going through loads and loads of applications and CVs, etc., that are just not right for the role. So we look at it in a more holistic sense, and think about how do you optimize your attraction based on performance all the way through the funnel, not just who is sending you the most applications, but or the most clicks or applies, but who is sending you people who end up completing an application and then who end up getting hired. And if you can track that data all the way through in aggregate, you can then optimize your spend and your campaign allocation for channels that are sending you the types of people who you end up hiring. Second part of that is, are you telling the best message about what it is like, what the truth message, what it is like to work there? And that comes down to the types of ads you're putting out, but also once somebody lands on your careers pages or on the job itself, are they getting a good sense of what it's like to work there, so that when they end up making a decision to apply, or sometimes better not to apply, they're going to arrive with their eyes open in an organization that they feel like they know about, and are therefore more likely to stay.
Yeah, interesting. Just one question on that. So, I mean, if I was to look at AssessFirst, the predominant majority of the candidates that we hire are using LinkedIn. So that would be an obvious funnel for us to go down to find our candidates. Do you kind of work with your clients on a unique basis to look at the types of candidates they're hiring, and then do you suggest the platforms that you advertise on? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so we're completely agnostic to the platforms, and our kind of point of departure is, you can reach people using digital channels for jobs wherever they are. Typically, you're just spending your money on, in the worst case, like credits on a job board where you have what comes through, slightly better on like pay for performance or programmatic advertising, but actually, if you want to reach the next generation of the workforce, Gen Z, like they're hanging out on TikTok or Facebook and Instagram are massive platforms to reach passive candidates. Yeah. So we would look at, what is the profile of the types of people who you are looking to hire in general? Where are they more likely to hang out? Definitely include those in the mix, but start off with running low-cost experiments across everything to understand which of these is sending you which of these is sending you a volume of candidates of the right quality that they end up getting hired, and then optimizing your talent attraction mix based on the true performance of those candidate sources. And that can be different for chefs in the Southwest. Could be the platform to reach them on is X, whereas in France or somewhere else, it's a completely different thing. But don't just do what you always did, which was buy a whack of job advertising credits from the same job board. But look at it based purely on data and invest in what works.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that intelligence, isn't it? That if we look from the candidate experience, the experience of logging onto a job board and scrolling through jobs or adding your CV, you aren't going into that process with any kind of direction or understanding as to what's going to be right, because everything is in the same format. Whereas I suppose if you are, for me, for example, if I was to be scrolling through TikTok and find an organization that really reached out to me, that would feel so much more authentic and so much more connected to who I am as an individual, and would kind of inspire me to want to take that next step to find out more about them.
And then I think kind of a crucially important part is that's one part, right? Now you've got someone's attention, they're interested in your organization or in a job you've posted, then what? Or they click on the ad and they come to your careers page. For far too many companies and people, that is the clunky front end of their applicant tracking system, or something that somebody from an agency built 5 years ago and just doesn't live up to the expectations of the modern internet user. You know, finding and applying for a job is one of the most important things we do. Why is it so much more painful and awful than booking an Airbnb? Or, you know, like, if you're serious about this, you need to level up your candidate experience, like to be at the same level as your consumer experience. So, you know, coming back to quality and kind of getting people to the right sorts of people to finish applying for jobs is, you know, you really need to look at the candidate experience post just the advertising, but what is it like to find out more about your organization? Do I get insights into what it's like to work there? How easy is it for me to navigate around your job pages to find the information I need and then to apply for a job?
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a practice that I engage in a lot every single time I post a new job. Like, what is this candidate journey? Where are they seeing this role posted? How do they apply? What is required for them to apply? How quick is it for them to actually get onto applications? So if anyone watching here isn't doing that, I strongly recommend it. And again, for us in talent acquisition, we spend so long writing our job advertisements. You know, you have your job description, but that's not the same as an advertisement. How are you actually using the right language to attract the right candidates, whilst giving this, you know, holistic view of the organization? So much time and effort into that process. But yeah, maybe we're not giving enough time to actually what happens before people land on that job advertisement. I know we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. For us, as you say, we're kind of looking at this as a bit of a sandwich, you know, employer giving all of the journey on how you get the right quality candidates to your organization. What AssessFirst help you do is understand, well, actually, what does good look like within that specific team or within a specific role? Because this is a really hard area to get right if you're just basing it on a subjective opinion. And of course, we all do that, right? We can look at people within our teams and we can go, yes, these are our top performers and this is the kind of person we want. But actually doing that whilst trying to minimize bias and increasing DEI within an organization is super tough. And it only takes a quick Google to see which organizations have made very, very large mistakes doing that in the past. So what we want to do is look at data. So actually, as soon as an organization starts to use AssessFirst, the first thing we recommend they do is actually give everybody in your organization our assessments. So everyone, every single employee at every single level of seniority. We get all that data back, and then we will ask the managers, and this is the only part that's subjective, but we hope that the managers will have enough data to remove any bias from this decision, to kind of rank the people within those teams. So say, hey, who are your top performers? Who are hitting their targets consistently? Who goes above and beyond to ensure that everything they do is in line with what you'd expect from a top performer within that team? And then we look at attitude. So who is most in line with your cultural values? Who is inspiring other people and showing that influence for other people in the team as well? And then we go, cool, okay, we've got that data based on the manager's opinion and, of course, the data that you're gathering on your teams. And then we look at the traits that these individuals that they display. And, of course, as you might expect, there is often a correlation. There is a collective pool of traits that are most prevalent in top performers. And that is then what we base your future hires on. So we go, cool. We can see that for this specific position, you really want people who are, they are quite assertive, they are super optimistic, they persevere when confronted with obstacles, et cetera, et cetera. And then you do the same for motivations. So, okay, cool. What kind of traits do we see in people who thrive in the organization? Maybe these people, they all really love making the world a better place. That's a key motivator for them. But actually, salary is a less strong motivator. It's not to say that salary isn't as important at all, but we know these people are going to want to jump out of bed and go to work every day because they love working for an organization that helps make the world a better place. So we have these really kind of constructive, very, very specific traits that you can then, when you are interviewing your candidates and they're having their assessments, you can basically compare against the benchmark of what success and what good looks like within your organization.
And that's the messaging you would need to get into, the type of people you're reaching is like, if these are the types of people who thrive here, and these are the things we need to dial up in terms of our employer brand development and the ads we're running to attract more people like that.
Exactly. And that's such an important point, because like assessments, then no one looks forward to doing an assessment for a job, right? No one like goes through an interview process and goes, oh, fantastic, I get to complete an assessment, can't wait to do this. And a big part of how we kind of speak with our clients to overcome that challenge is, as you said, it's all about how you pitch it to them, from the very start of their journey, making candidates aware that there is a benefit of completing an assessment that's done in the right way, because it is going to give you that insight as to not just whether you're a good fit for the organization, but whether the organization is a good fit for you. And that's so crucial to then mean candidates approach the assessment going, okay, cool, I'm going to find some cool information out about myself. I'm going to learn really whether this company is right for me, rather than spending the next 5 hours across a period of a month interviewing for them. Like we're going to get all that information now. But as you say, if we were to think really strategically on this, I would be wanting to know, right, how early in this candidate journey can we start mentioning the benefits of assessments? So by the time they get to actually completing it, they're totally happy and they know why they should be doing it. And we actually know that candidates who've completed an AssessFirst profile once for a previous organization, once they've completed their assessments, they do look for that in the future. And I've had a ton of applicants for obviously our company that go, oh yeah, I've interviewed with 3 or 4 different companies in the past. Like they've all used AssessFirst. We had such an amazing experience. And that really carries through that journey, right? To improve the candidate experience wherever you're interviewing moving forwards.
Definitely.
Awesome. So it'd be cool to maybe hear a little bit about a real life example, Matt. So tell us about a client you worked with, a journey that you've helped improve.
Sure. We've got quite a good one and very new one. So I'm not sure I can tell you who they are, but they are one of the UK's biggest health and beauty perfume retailers, 270 stores across the country. We've just rebuilt their whole front end, a new careers hub, giving them a new canvas on which to essentially express, what it is like to work there. Much smoother application processes, a much easier job search, full accessibility for people with neurodivergency. All of this is nice, but so what? The results in just the first 2 months compared to the previous period has been a reduction in time to hire by 13 days or 40% on what they were experiencing before.
Gosh.
Another Wagamama, I can say that one. It's one of our partners. Also got a new front end, interestingly, like a slightly more advanced kind of flows product on the applications, which means a candidate, you can have a completely different application process for different role types. So senior managers will go through a completely different journey to, a kitchen porter, for example, and with like customized questions within the process to allow candidates to self-select out. We don't do any kind of automatic or automated filtering of people. We kind of are opposed to that on a number of grounds, but if you give candidates the opportunity to self-select out based on like, hey, this is an airport shift, you're going to have to wake up at 2 a.m. to be there at 3. Are you sure you want to do this? You give them a second to think, actually, probably not. And as an example. But we have improved the conversion rate of application to hires by 22% for their senior and most hard to fill roles, again, through that. So those are a couple of examples of how, and these are kind of proxies for quality, but they are meaning like the right people are getting through and getting hired, which means hiring managers are saving time, vacancies are filled, service quality improves, and the business runs better. Yeah.
I've been having a lot of conversations recently about the difference between the importance of employers hiring people versus the importance of people getting a job. And it's very easy for us as employers to go, yes, it's super important we fill this vacancy. These are the business needs that we need to fulfill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to get as many people as possible. And if there's no personalization of that process, there's no real thinking about the journey of the candidates, ultimately you're not going to be getting the best people for the role long term.
Yeah.
Of course, important. But then when I think about, how important it is for people to get a job, especially in the economic climate we find ourselves in at the moment, like, it's so in our best interest as employers to make that journey as easy and as beneficial for them as possible, so that they're getting the right organizational fit and going to be the most successful in their teams. And like, I wouldn't even think personally, honestly, about creating different candidate journeys and application processes from the very, very start for different seniority of roles. Like, that's, when you think of it, you're like, well, duh, of course that's great.
I mean, the future of the internet is personal, and like, this has to come to this. When you buy something, your experience is completely tailored to you, what we figured out about you. The same needs to be applied to finding a job. And you're right, like, there's this kind of interplay between companies needing to find people and people needing to find jobs. But actually, if you can get that to work as smoothly and efficiently as possible, companies work and operate much better. People find the right jobs where they fit and they're paid well and they're treated well more easily, and everybody is better off.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely been a change in the language companies are using on their websites and job advertisements as well. It used to be very, very, very formal, very corporate, whereas people are trying so much harder to bring like the personality of the organization and the humanity of an organization through that experience too. And it's just about that human connection, isn't it? And as I said at the start, if we can make it clear to our candidates we truly care and we truly see them, we're going to get that back in return. And it's about giving that investment early on to reap the rewards later.
Agreed.
Awesome. Moving on to frictionless candidate journeys. So this is a super interesting topic. I hadn't really thought about the phrase of having friction within a candidate journey and how we can like immediately remove all that. But it'd be great to hear like the work Inploi have been doing on this, and your take on it.
Absolutely. So we look at friction in two ways. What, like, unnecessary, horrible, must be removed as fast as possible friction, and desirable, useful, it leads to better outcomes friction. But the first one is kind of linked back to clunky application experiences, or the unnecessary friction for people trying to find your jobs and apply for them, or learn about your company, and that could be starting on where your ads end up on the internet. Is some horrible data harvesting website scraping your ads and then like capturing people's contact details and personal information before they can ever get to be in a place to be able to apply for your job, through to, okay, I'm on my mobile phone, I'm applying for an entry-level position that doesn't require loads of experience, and yet you're forcing me to upload a CV, which I obviously don't have on my phone. Or the resolution of the application form doesn't scale to my Samsung from 5 years ago, so I can't click on the apply button. You're asking me like standard form ATS mandated questions, including like, what is my veteran status, because it's an American system, for me to be a waiter, and it takes half an hour. Those are all highly undesirable friction points that should be stripped out as fast as possible. Something that we see much more frequently is like requiring somebody to register before they can even submit an application. The attention span of people, you just need to say these days, is so short. I think the CXO magazine reported that 60% of people will quit an application that takes more than 3 minutes. That just means like all the work you're doing on your employer brand and your advertising, all the money you're spending to attract people is leaking straight out the side of the bucket, because I'm on my phone and I'm on the bus and you want a CV and I don't have that. So these are all undesirable friction points. Another is the lack of and this is kind of a moral imperative as well, accessibility on so much of the internet, and certainly on these application processes. If people with neurodivergency, or if you're hard of sight or hard of hearing, or whatever that may be, there is, in the States now, there's a whole bunch of legislation live in some states and being tabled in others, and it'll come to the EU for sure, around the requirement for websites to be accessible to people who are differently abled. So much of that is not the case now. So we try to remove as much necessary friction as possible. Our careers pages and application processes, etc., are all up to the highest levels of web accessibility by default, which means you can completely customize your application or your experience of the site using a little widget based on whatever it is that you're experiencing. The second part is desirable friction, which comes back to the quality point, and we call it targeted friction. That's a purely inploi phrase, but maybe it'll become industry parlance once this catches on. Is again putting people through application processes that allow them to self-select out, or to better qualify that they are really intended on, are really down to get this job, that they fully appreciate what it requires. Now, some clients we have in the application process, they select which sites they'd like to work in, which times they're available, all of which is to save hiring managers time downstream, so that when an application lands in your ATS, it is already pretty highly pre-qualified, and that they're interested in doing the job. They certainly believe quite strongly that they're capable of doing the job, and you're not going to spend half the day calling up people who don't respond to your phone calls, for example. So that was a long answer, but friction.
It's again, it's so interesting as a topic, because we just had a question about, shouldn't candidates shouldn't there be a bit of effort in the process? Shouldn't some effort be required to apply for the role? And I totally agree. Yes, you want to know candidates have, researched your organization. And I think that's where the effort should come in, right? You should make sure your candidates are educated on the role, on the expectations, on the organizational culture, the vision of the organization. But I strongly believe it shouldn't be difficult for the candidate to find that information. That's on us internally to make sure the process is frictionless to find that information, then make sure the candidate can analyze that to understand whether it's right for them. And what tends to happen is that we post all of the shiny, lovely rainbow parts of working in a team all over our websites and our careers pages and our advertisements. And then a candidate comes into the interview, and that's when we go, oh, by the way, you need to be able to work a 3 a.m. start shift at the airport. And that wastes everybody's time. So I think, yes, we want to be able to know the candidate knows the organization they're hiring for, but the point is to make it the good and the bad that might actually turn a candidate off the role. We need to be just as transparent with that as we are the good parts. And then, of course, we can question them and go, okay, cool, you've seen that there's a 4 a.m. start, or you need to be able to travel for 60% of this role. The candidate's going to go, yeah, that's totally fine with me. Not a problem. I saw that. I appreciate the transparency, but it's still the role that I want to go for.
I think sidebar, and something I just thought about is, I think organizations need to start to think about and get ready for a coming wave of just automated applications, AI bots, reading job descriptions, role requirements, taking profiles, crafting applications, and firing off thousands of them. Obviously, the candidates are not going to be able to speak to all of those people, nor will they be interested to. But the scattergun approach is there are already tools that do this. So how do you, again, screen for actual people rather than machines?
Yeah, it's so true. So true. And I think there'll always be, of course, the human part of the recruitment process is so important for creating that connection. And it's always the part that I love the most about working in talent acquisition. It's getting to know an individual and seeing them in what's quite a vulnerable stage of their lives, right? Anyone who's looking for a job is doing it because they need a job. There is something that is missing from their current situation that they need to have provided with. And there's no technology that will replace the connection that you create through a conversation, particularly when it helps people find that right job.
Yeah.
And yeah, that transparency is so important to do that correctly. Leading on from that, something that has been truly a blessing for me in my processes since using AssessFirst, and like ultimately it's always been the hardest part of recruiting, and that's rejecting candidates. I remember when I first joined recruitment, and I was hiring for a recruitment agency, very, very high volume of applications, but very tough to find the right candidates. And we didn't use any type of assessments. It was all based on, identifying resilience and competitive nature in graduates, and it was tough. And there was always a lot of candidates to reject. And one thing that we always did was we rejected every candidate over the phone. So there'd be some days where I come in and I'm like, oh God, I've got to go and reject a ton of candidates. And like my boss would say, just get it done first thing. Like as soon as you get into work, call those candidates and get it out the way, because it was such a hard part of the job to do right. And what's been so cool about AssessFirst is that, of course, every candidate who we interview, prior to the interview, actually, as soon as they apply, they complete the assessments, they get their reports, so they can see an overview of their motivations and personality traits, kind of as a general application. And then I will be able to make a decision on who to move forward based on that benchmark fit that we discussed earlier. But it also means that for the candidates that aren't successful, I've got really, really objective evidence on why they aren't a fit. So it means that if a candidate is rejected, we have a predictive model alignment. So I will typically interview a candidate who scores above like 65% alignment to the predictive model, which is based on that performance and attitude data we mentioned earlier. So if a candidate comes in and they're scoring like 42%, I'm like, there's a very clear difference between who you are as an individual, the type of environment you're going to thrive in, and what AssessFirst can provide. But rather than that being it, I can go into detail. So if a candidate comes back to me and goes, hey, like, thanks for letting me know I've been rejected. Thanks for telling me that there's a difference. Like, can you tell me why? I can go like super, super granular on that. So for example, there was a candidate that queried the rejection recently. I went back to the person and I said, you scored a 58% to the predictive model of the role. His results showed that, I'm reading this off a screen, so I don't want to get it wrong. His results showed that he wasn't motivated by a competitive and remuneration-driven environment, whereas this role in question it very much required those two motivations. And another thing we look at is culture. So AssessFirst in particular, we're a fully remote organization. There's a lot of candidates out there who just won't thrive in that type of dynamic, in that type of situation. So if we can see this on their results, we can take that data to them. 9 times out of 10, they go, yeah, actually, I totally see that. Like, thank you for telling me. But what's cool about this as well is if a candidate is a fit for our culture, they will thrive in a remote organization. They want the type of structure we provide, but they don't fit a certain role. That means there's still an opportunity for them to come back to AssessFirst in the future when there is a different position that might match more of those needs. So it's really great for creating that kind of long-term relationship with candidates as opposed to rejecting them super early on. Awesome. Okay, so we've got just enough time, I think, to whiz through our last point. So we've talked a lot about the journey and the experience, but the data and how we're measuring this is also super important. So if you wouldn't mind giving some insight into how you're actually tracking data, that'd be cool.
I mean, all of this is completely academic unless you can actually measure it and understand if what is working, what is not, and evidence that with real, dependable, objective information, data. And I think one thing we're continually astounded by is just how little actual data people have, or how little reliable data teams have, and how much time they spend trying to make sense of lots of different sources of information that are telling them different things, and trying to hacking that together to provide a report that somebody's needing for very important reasons to decide how much budget to allocate, et cetera. So we've built a completely bespoke kind of in-house tracking an analytics infrastructure that sort of follows a anonymized, but a user, a candidate from first contact with an ad or a brand on whatever platform that might be, all the way through the application process, and even into the ATS. Kind of surfaces all of that data into beautifully designed dashboards that give you the information you need on demand. Why does that matter? Well, it gives you the information you need to decide on investment decisions, for example, to what we're talking about earlier. Where do you spend your recruitment marketing budget? You may be spending it on X provider who tells you they send you all these applications, but based on the actual performance, like 95% of them don't finish a job ad, and then 10%, only 5% of those that do, you end up hiring. So, it's £1 per application, but it's £2,000 per hire, whereas this one sends you a lower volume. So a lower volume of traffic that converts at a much higher rate, that you end up hiring, and then who ends up staying with your organization. So suddenly you're zooming out a little bit and saying, hang on, where am I getting the highest return on my investment? And that's kind of fundamental to all we do, to what we do. You can also then look at the candidate experience and say, where are people dropping off? One big holiday company that we work with, height of the kind of post-pandemic labor crisis, awful application experience, was requiring a CV for entry-level positions. We put in our front end, we looked at the data, let's run an experiment, let's take this out. Suddenly, more than doubled the number of applications that we're getting through, and it led to much, much higher outcomes. But you can't know that unless you can see it. So data is essential to understanding what you're doing and making informed decisions. And it's fundamental to our approach to all of this.
I think what's really interesting about that is seeing where candidates drop out of the application process. I know that a lot of us struggle with high volume, but again, going back to that point of, for candidates, this is a needs must situation, and they are going to be applying to jobs as much as they possibly can, but probably only the ones that make this process the easiest for them. Would you kind of recommend that an organization, I suppose you can give this data back to them and go, hey, you're getting X amount of drop off at this point of the process. This is what we recommend to do to change that. Like, how does that?
We're pretty hypothesis driven. So we would say, what if this changed? Let's not completely overhaul your entire experience. Let's send some users down this pathway and some down this pathway and see what happens, and then make a decision based on that. So I guess in our in our finest form, we're an innovation partner to people teams we're working with. We kind of think of ourselves as an extension of their team, working with them to spend as little. People spend a huge amount of money on recruitment marketing, like third-party platforms to get candidates. Our end game is to spend zero of that. So how do you reach people organically? How do you optimize the experience? And how do you build a much smarter system that is constantly innovating? So that's how we like to work. And absolutely, we look at the data and say, based on these things that we see in the application process and when people falling out, this is how this could be improved. Or you're running a campaign for X, that traffic should really be coming to a dedicated landing page so that people land in a context where they understand what is going on and they're more motivated to apply for a role. Let's see what the data says once we've done that.
It's the same with us as well. And I can refer to my own personal experience of AssessFirst. We are very big on NPS surveys. We highly recommend that candidates leave Google reviews as well. And our Google reviews, they're the proof of the pudding. We have thousands of 4 or 5 star reviews of people saying how amazing the experience was and how informative the process was through using the AssessFirst platform. And what's really funny for me is I try my hardest to be, super personable and reactive and make sure I'm giving feedback quick and moving the process along. But almost all the feedback that we get in our NPS surveys is based on our assessments, because people are so blown away by this new approach to an interview process and what assessments can actually look like and how quick they can be. And I'm like, cool, if that's the focal point of what a candidate takes away from this experience, then amazing, because that feedback doesn't change whether a candidate's hired or not. And the process, the interview structure can be so archaic, it can be very stagnant. I love the idea of bringing something new and fresh into these processes, like assessments that we do at AssessFirst, to mean that people leave going, wow, like that was innovative, that was something so new, and to give people a new perspective of what can be done to make this process better. So yeah, it's so cool to be in an area, whether it's inploi, whether it's AssessFirst, that is really challenging that status quo and finding better ways of working this process from start to finish.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, we've got a minute left. Let's have a look. So do you have an approach for candidates who may not match a particular role but resonate with the company culture? Yeah, so as I kind of touched on earlier, there's a lot of room for making people aware of the cultural fit. And if that's there, being like, registered to our newsletter, for example, or follow us on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, so that they are constantly made aware of new opportunities that could be a good fit. I think keeping that engaged candidate pool is super important, whether you're like running events, inviting them to webinars. People buy from people, and I think the same goes for a job. The sooner I can create that personal connection, the more relevance we'll have for them in the future, and also their network then becomes part of our network as well. You know, the more we can work on referrals, the better, and vice versa as well. I often say to people, this fit at AssessFirst isn't right for you, but I know this culture is going to be, we know from the data this cultural fit is there. So actually, I recommend that you go and interview for this organization that operates in a similar way, for example. And again, creating that kind of community, I think, is so valuable in our industry. Okay, I think we are just out of time, and I think that is all the questions as well. Thank you so much for hopping on and chatting with us, Matt. It's been super interesting. And I hope everyone has enjoyed the discussion. Obviously, you can find us both on LinkedIn if anybody would like to chat further. But if not, hopefully you guys have all got something to go and implement into your processes.
Thank you for having me, Lauren, and thanks everybody for joining. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.